Welcome to Keeping Up with Data. Keeping Up with Data is the podcast that keeps data enthusiasts up to speed with what is happening in the data world. We bring in the leading minds from the data industry to talk all things career, news, embarrassing stories, failures and successes.
So something really important for us here at Precision Sourcing is mental health. It's something we've been focused on a lot over the last year or so, and we're lucky enough to have partnered with the Black Dog Institute. And we're going to be doing a lot of events with them this year. A lot of our events, money will be going towards them. And they're out there aiming to create a mentally healthier world for everyone. So if you wish to support the cause, please donate via the link in the bio on this podcast, and you'll be seeing a lot more information about Black Dog over the next year.
Welcome to Keeping Up with Data. I'm Emily Nota.
I'm James Ross.
And I'm Lisa Garbutt.
Lisa, it's so good to have you on today.
Thank
I thought
you.
we could start with you and a bit of background of your career and obviously who you are generally as well.
Yes, I work for a bank, so in the financial sector, and I started my career in financial services actually, but then evolved into pharmaceuticals and other industries, including construction. So I've had a very a broad industry experience, I think, in terms of that. But my initial role when I first set out to decide what I wanted to be when I grow up was in compliance. So I decided I really liked that area, and I enjoyed risk, and so I set out, and I won't reveal my age, but it was back in the day when into office envelopes and carrier pigeons. So there wasn't much way of officially having terms like data governance and even data as being a focal point for a risk factor for the industries. But certainly I think as time went on and I started working with more and more in risk and in quality, and became an auditor as well. So, and then the importance of data, even underpinning general risk in an organisation, became really, really critical. So I think I sort of evolved into data in a way. It wasn't really something that I'd set out to do, but it fits really well around the governance model.
I was going to say that's like the best pathway, because like James, you obviously work data governance roles. I don't so much, but you're like an expert, and that's probably one of the pathways you'd look for, right? The ideal.
Yeah, because there's obviously a lot of crossover. I'm sure you experience it's like the attention to detail. It's that very big people factor, and you have to be switched on, and you can't just take a no for an answer. And you have to be always thinking outside the box, but still also working to regulations or to certain standards.
Yeah, awesome. And I suppose like that tails on to my question is like, what was the most pivotal moment for you in your career to date, do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I think, like I say, I feel like I evolved, but I've always loved data, and even from a young child, and I don't want to give away all my anal retentiveness, but I'm one of those people that knows, 10 years of driving to the same workplace and know every lane change at every pivotal moment to get to the end point at the quickest possible time. So I think I always sort of used data in that way. And when I was 16, again, I think one of the things that really sort of was exciting, I am revealing my age now, the introduction of scanning, in BILO, in one of my first jobs. And we get our scan rates at the end of the day, and it was like, how can I better that? How can I, what do I need to do? Get the bags ready at the end, and then you can throw them in there, more quickly, or get them all lined up first and not have the barcodes looking the right way so that you can get. So it was really, I think, for me, data's, to start with was a way of improving, right? So just baselining yourself and saying, well, how can I do better? How can I do better? So the way you measure through data is just key for any organisation, or personally, so you benchmark yourself like I do with stupid things like, scan rates. So that was possibly, as I was moving through my career, the need to understand how to measure performance. That was the critical piece for me that started to say, okay, this isn't just about data, protecting data and trusting data. It's actually about using data in a way that actually takes your organisation to the next level and really shows that value.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's like the pinnacle. What do you think people aren't doing to well in order to get to that level at the moment?
Yeah, look, I think this is just a personal thing, and I have worked in risk, of course, and so I was around in the 80s and 90s when safety was first sort of realizing that we had to be better at it. So, a lot of apprentices were being killed on sites, and then they said, oh, we better induct them, and we better do a green card, and we better do training, and we better do supervision, and we better have all this integrated because we need to have all these registers and record keeping. And really, when you look at quality systems and safety systems, it's really what we're trying to do with data. We're trying to keep it safe. We're really trying to give it good quality, and the governance programs and overlays are actually identical. So you can actually apply the principles of managing safety and managing quality in your organisation across the whole data landscape, which is what I try to do. Yeah.
Awesome. And it sounds like, go on, you're going to ask.
I was going to say, well, it's like safety is like a universal language as well, right?
Absolutely.
So
yes.
It makes it very relatable and very common
yes.
for everyone across the business, especially if there are like people working on site and people kind of working straight on direct tools.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that I saw in the 80s and early 90s particularly was the cultural shift. And this is what we're needing in data now, is the cultural shift. So it's not about having a role in an organisation that says your data governance, therefore everything's on you. It's about saying to the organisation, everybody's responsible for data, and not using stewardship as a role, but using it as a set of behaviours that drive that governance. So I feel it's shifting because of now the data breaches that we're experiencing and people's fear. Safety, look, people were dying, we better do something. People now are really getting exposed, and we're losing billions annually. So that in itself is I suppose putting the onus back on organisations, and particularly at the exec level, to really understand the importance of data and what it means to be trusted and to be safe.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, cultural shift. You kind of answered that already, but I've noticed, obviously, since the breaches, like you said, but do you think people are starting to generally shift as an organisation, or is it still like a kind of, we need to do more governance and like a battle uphill with execs?
Look, I think from my personal experience, again, I think I'm finding execs are more and more invested. I think they're really now well aware of what good data means to them, and it's decision making at the end of the day. So if they haven't got good data, they're not making good decisions. So I think they understand the importance of it. I think in my experience, I always hear the word bandwidth. I haven't got the bandwidth or resource constraints, and that's where you start to sort of really then start to think about how do you inject a data governance culture into people that are always minimal bandwidth, resource constraint, time poor. Yeah. So that's why I think, like I say, it's more about looking at an integrated approach to the work. So you and everybody is invested, and setting up a community that understand data and understand what it means. I do often get, even having worked in this role with the bank now for a year, we've uplifted the maturity in such a great way, but I still get the call to say, can you approve this? I want to I want to add a new data code. It's not me. So again, it's just education around. I'm the one that's going to make sure that the right people make the right decision at the right time. I'm not going to be the one to make the decision. So I think that's, again, when you think about what the safety industry and the quality industry had to do to get into that sort of, ownership piece, that's what we have to do in data, is to really, not deflect people's say in data and where they need to be across it, and they need to be aware that you actually are involved.
Yeah. I was going to say, well, I know we've spoken about this before, to kind of give everyone a bit more context, what you've achieved there, especially over the last year, is what a lot of people are actually looking to do in terms of the ownership and the more awareness. what were the key points or like the pivotal moments even in like the last 12 months that helped you to actually get people on board and to start actually taking ownership of their data or just be more aware? Because I think it's a big challenge everyone faces.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think, so I do have a system of work, I think I mentioned earlier, that I use, and it's my sort of my secret sauce or my model, my model, and it has evolved over time, and it gets better every time I have to improve it. But I think that is, I'm happy to make that available, by the way, for people to have a look at and use. I call it the data governance system of work, and what it is, it's an integrated approach, and it takes a quality framework. And it says, okay, for everything you do in data governance, so you have things like data retention, data algorithm assurance, metadata management, and so on. We've got all these things that we have to do in data, issue and change, quality. For all of those things, everybody, first of all, has to have a policy. They need to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. They need to have a set of operating standards or procedures that tells them how to do it. And they need to have clear lines of roles and responsibilities. So that's the first thing. Is that everybody that's working in that hub of the model has to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and how the responsibility lies, and accountability. And then the second pillar to that then is capability. So training them, providing the understanding the needs matrix to understand how to build maturity in that space. So that's the second thing. Then we have consultation and engagement. When do you need to get people sitting in a room having conversations? What are the key decisions that they're trying to make? What is it? How does it relate to the hub of the model in all those activities? And then the tools and enablers. Now, in this case, it's, it can be anything. I mean, back in the day, and I'm sure some of our audience will still attest to Excel spreadsheets with every form of register you can possibly imagine. You might have a quality register over here, you might have an issue register over here, you might have, all these different, purging register over there, and all of these different registers. But I think one of the things that we did do in the bank that's been really helpful was introduce an automated solution. So we have, and I'm sure they won't mind me, although there's no backhanders, I promise, but we've gone with Elation as a business glossary and, full end-to-end data lineage, and policy center and governance, so we can build workflow around change control with data. So that in itself was a real quick uplift. So in this model, you've got your tools and enablers, so that's another piece. And then finally, you have to measure yourself. You have to monitor and measure and measure and measure. And of course, to start with your baseline, and then you just incrementally see how the uplift is in the organisation around data and everything we do.
I can imagine it sounds like you have to rely on having the correct data to begin with as well.
Yes.
Because like when you're talking about doing your scan, like your barcode rate, if you weren't having the correct information, you wouldn't know how to get better.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the first thing that I ever heard, and I went, ooh, and I might have been 27 or something, and someone says, rubbish in, rubbish out, and you get that. It's like, ooh, I like that. But, and we still use it today, and so that's where the quality comes in, and that's where that's why it's so important to have an integrated approach, because everything, it's like a spider's web. Like you dangle the web over here and over here will move. And so you have to have an integrated view of how to manage data in an organisation. So, I think that's been my, personal feeling of success. But it comes with its challenges as well, and underpinning all of that is stewardship. And like I mentioned before, stewardship isn't necessarily to us in our particular bank anyway a role. So we're not going to come and say, hey, you be a steward for that data set or that domain. We're likely going to say to you, you're the subject matter expert on this data, and something needs to be done with it. So we'd like you to have a look at it, or we'd like you to curate that data because you're the subject matter of that. Oh, look, you've just done some stewardship behaviours, So it's more evolving people into what stewardship is, rather than saying, right, you're gonna have to do this now, and it's additional to what you're doing, and we know you're time poor, and you haven't got the time to be bothered with all of this, and it's just another thing you've got to do. It's got to be integrated.
For sure. Well, off the back of that and the governance sort of systems that you've talked about, like you've been in a few industries, is it easier to get people on board and on the journey and get buy-in from execs in a banking and highly regulated industry versus other ones you've been in?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've had banking and financial services in quite a different aspect, and then also pharmaceuticals, and each of those industries are highly regulated in their own different ways, and but all of it affects data. So that's sort of like and what I found actually even within those industries, so, I've worked across in pharmaceutical, I've worked within human resources operations and systems implementations and transformation programs, and in facilities management, properties, engineering services, and everyone has the same problems with the data, and they all have the same issues, and it's all the same. And I think I mentioned before that, the system of work that I refer to is the same across all of them, all of those industries. So, you're either pregnant or you're not. You don't half do governance, it's one of those things that you don't just do it better for a highly regulated than you would for anybody else. You do it the same, and it's equally as important. So, yeah.
It's a very good analogy. I do think what we've seen, because obviously it's a growing space, is that some of the industries that don't have a regulating body or just kind of don't have the same sort of standards they have to adhere to, yes, they don't want any breaches, although there's a mindset that if we just throw money and put a team together, that everything's okay. What would your advice be to people, working in like governance-related roles in these industries where they do have that kind of difficult mindset to deal with from an executive level? How would they best go about trying to change their mind or trying to educate them to essentially make them see that not half-ass it?
Yeah. Look, I think, all right, I'm going to use another safety analogy, which I didn't expect to do today, but it's, so as you're growing up, your ability to assess danger and risk improves with age. And the reason that improves with age is because you gather more and more artifacts and understanding and knowledge of understanding the consequence of something could happen, and the likelihood it will happen. So the likelihood it will happen might be like, I'm going to go for a swim and I think, I'm not going to go for a swim because I might get eaten by a shark. But the likelihood of getting eaten by a shark is a lot less when the older you get, because you start to build up this artifact, this database of saying, oh well, there's never been a fatality at this beach, but there's been 10 at that beach, so I won't swim at that beach, but I'll swim at this beach. It's the same with data governance and any sort of system that you're trying to implement, is that over time, the education piece is the big thing. So what you want to be sharing with your executives are the bad news stories. How many data breaches have there been? What have there been the failings in those environments that have caused, what the cause of those breaches? I was looking just at the other day at some of the statistics coming out of the government, and human error accounts for a lot of some of our data breaches, and so it's understanding and educating them that this is why. And then the consequences. So what's the likelihood? You build out of giving lots and lots of examples of what's going on. So maybe creating a newsletter, building people's information banks and databases on the impacts of data and what it can do to them. And then also the good news stories. So you can say, well, this is the value we're now adding with data. So marketing. So marketing your data as a function and saying, hey, look, now we have this trusted data and you can go and make a really good decision, and look, we've grown, exponentially in the last 12 months because of that. So it's just any time you can get to spruik it or educate on it, likelihood, consequence, that's my kind of
So full awareness.
Full awareness
Yeah.
program, yeah.
Yeah.
Not hiding from like the horror stories or all like, the
Absolutely not.
consequences.
Yeah, in fact, and it's funny because, you know, as with safety, and again, you know, I don't know if you realise this, but, you know, there's an instinct we all have to go and read all the morbid things in the newspaper. And that's because we need to, as a human race, protect ourselves from extinction. So we learn and educate why people pass away or why they have these tragic accidents so we don't get in the tragic accidents ourselves. So in this case, how do we prevent the tragic accident of a data breach? It's by educating ourselves on how they occur and why they occur and where our vulnerabilities are as an organisation.
I really like that
Yeah,
because
same.
it's just like when you watch a horror movie back, especially as a kid, you hate it, but you still always open your eyes, put your fingers out, and you look through.
Yeah, and you like look around. Your
I never did that. I never did that. I never opened my eyes.
That's a good way to put it. Well, I suppose across your journey as well, like you would have had a lot of pivotal people that have coached you or somewhat like added value and to get to where you are today. So is there any particular traits or things they've done for you that you can sort of, I suppose, mention that would be helpful?
Yeah, look, I think, yeah, and this is absolutely a personal journey. And I think, you know, I've been really lucky in my career to have lots of wonderful managers. I could honestly say that there was only one that I didn't particularly align with, and I won't go into that, but we'll look on the positive more, is that in every one of those positive cases, I always felt supported. I always felt they had my back, that I could take risks with what I was doing and be experimental to some extent. And so that was really important to me, to have, you know, their trust. And out of that, I felt valued. So, and I constantly got feedback. So, you know, and for me, like even now, I don't want to mention anybody's names because they'll all be comparing themselves. But my current manager, I will say, he's amazing. And the thing I'm feeling right now is that I'm learning and growing. And so, you know, whatever stage in your career you're at, I suppose, and even in governance, I mean, you know, I've had lots and lots of years experience, but I'm still learning and growing in the space. And to have somebody that can, you know, coach and mentor and guide you and say, hey, if you want to just run something by me and, you know, whiteboard it, then let's do that. That's a perfect manager, and then of course know his stuff and endorse spruik it to the execs. So, you know, having that voice of saying, this is why we need to do this, this is what we're doing, and this is, you know, and everyone's like, yeah, good on you, you know.
You said earlier that you had a lot of these managers didn't come from traditional data governance-y backgrounds as well, which is cool. So I suppose what have you seen them come from, and how, I suppose, does that translate to a good data governance specialist, manager, head of, whatever it might look like?
Yeah, I think the trait that I'm very lucky to have, you know, good people in the broader team that are, you know, that they understand the importance of keeping data safe and building trust in data. And so in any sort of situation, it's easier then once they understand that, you know, the value. So I suppose in some way it's about building use cases out to the business to say, hey, I don't know if you realise this, but if you spend a bit of time curating this data over here, you know, that actually sits in some reporting over here that you could then say is well trusted, and that will feed into your board report and give you, you know, more comfortable conversations with the board. And so it's those sorts of things, just having those sorts of conversations, planting seeds all the way, you know.
Yeah, because I feel like that skill set, James, you can also add to this, like it's very hard to hire because it is relatively fresh. You don't really look for the data governance title, you look for the things that they do, like quality and all that kind of stuff that you mentioned, lineage, etc. So I suppose like maybe advice would be maybe to someone who's in a greenish role that wants to get into data governance, or even on the other side, like a hiring manager who's struggling to find data governance consultants that are relatively new and green. but they need some part of the data governance kind of policy framework, kind of what you said, privacy. Like, how would you go about recruiting with that in mind, that they're quite green?
Yeah, look, I think again, you know, like I think the biggest trade I've seen in people that are taking on data governance, that have never taken on data governance, but are actively participating in data governance, is curiosity, and I think it's where they just start to, like I said, ask questions. It's like, oh, Lisa, somebody come to me and said, you know, they want to make this change in this data, and I just thought I'd run it by you, and great, you know, like let's talk about that, and yeah, we'll go and talk to that person, and here's the process that you need to follow, or the, you know, it's just more about having that curiosity and understanding, and just and when I see that, I'm more excited by that than people that are just, you know, like checking a box, and you know what I mean, like it's and it's the conversations, you know, like so part of that model, we talked about consultation and engagement as one of the pieces. So, you know, you have forums where you have these conversations, and you can spark those, you know, those things around data that are meaningful to everybody, but nobody's willing to take ownership of it. Well, make it a joint, you know, collaborative decision-making process that you all agree on what needs to be done, and then you're all improving it together.
Yeah.
So it's that community. And I think that's where the Elation tool does help, actually, because that builds that community out. So you've got areas that you can go and ask questions around data, and then by natural attrition you curate that data. So as you go, and you can put warning flags on and all sorts of things, so people understand the state of the data. So that is useful as well, I must admit. Having a tool like that.
I was going to say, it's almost like splitting the responsibility. It's that case of, you know, like instead of me doing this one big thing, we've got 6 of us doing this smaller thing, so it seems more achievable. And then, like you said, everyone just starts thinking about it, and then naturally it just starts to happen.
Yes.
And obviously then become a bit more of a habit, and people don't have to think about it too much. It's just like, oh, I have to do this.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like this is a good segue into, like, well, personally, I feel sold to work for your team, but like, if someone's out there listening and they're like, God, I want to find this woman, I want to work for her, like, what would you say would be, I don't know, your sales pitch to a degree, but like, what are your ethos for leadership and data governance in your teams?
Yeah, that's a good question. You hear all these different jargon about leadership styles and so forth, and I think the one that probably resonates is servant leadership. I think, you know, I like the way my boss interacts with me, therefore I probably interact the same way with other people, is that I like to be hands-on when I'm needed, but completely hands-off when people say, let me go, I'm ready, you know, cut the cord. So I think and the same what I think I described of my ideal managers is, you know, I have their back. They can take risks. They can really be creative about this. There's not one cookie cutter, you know, for everyone or every organisation. Definitely not. So I would say yes. I'm probably one of those leaders that gives an inch, takes an inch, gives a yard, takes a yard. Yeah.
We have the saying here at Precision that to treat everyone the same, you have to treat everyone differently. Sounds like that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah,
as
that's
well,
a good
like,
saying,
you know?
actually. Yeah, that's nice.
It's hard to. It's like with all those mandates and everything that's going around. Like, it's so hard to mandate. Like, when people are just so different. So if you treat everyone differently, treat them the same. You know.
Yeah.
Because everyone's unique.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we're nearing the end. But is there anything else that you wanted to chat about before we let you go?
No, but thank you. It's been a great opportunity, and it's been wonderful.
Been good to have
meet
you
both. And
it's actually been a really good conversation. I really insightful.
Very timely as well, and just I think there's like a lot of valuable golden nuggets, like you said.
Yeah.
Like a lot of things that people can take away from this.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, no, good.
Well, thank you.
Are you going to ask me the zombie apocalypse?
Okay, the zombie apocalypse question you're itching to answer. So who would you bring it?
I had to think about this a real lot. Right. So I'm a family of 5 and I'm only allowed 3. so I didn't want to show who my favourite child was. So I'm going to leave them with their father.
Okay.
I'm going to bring in 3 fresh ones. So I'm going to bring in Tom Hardy because you need something nice to look at, and he will help defend me with the zombies. Clearly, he's got that ability. I'd bring Anna Polyview because I'd love to. I'm a foodie by nature, and obviously eat well. And she's very funny. I've done some cooking lessons with her, and she's extremely great sense of humour. And then the third is Sting, because I think we all like to have a little bit of good music.
This is a great answer. It's the best one I've seen.
Oh, is it?
I feel like it's just well
I
rounded.
had to. I really thought that. And like I said, I was struggling with the children bit, but anyway.
Well, yours is more important. We won't go through ours. And that's a wrap.